Hello everyone, my name is Ratkovic Miloje. I am Grandmaster from Serbia. In this video course we will talk about Benko Gambit. What can we say about that opening? First of all, we call it Benko Gambit because first strong Grandmaster, Super Grandmaster who played that opening was Paul Benko. This opening is very sharp, and you know that this is Gambit, so in must-win situations or when you want just to get some very active position after first few moves, you need to play this. Some of lines are very complicated and you need to analyze these lines very carefully, but if you remember main ideas, main principles, main patterns, you will not have problems in lines. Let's start with concrete things, and first we will analyze the main line, so full accepted variation. Let's go. So white plays d4, you play knight f6, c4, you play c5, and after d5 you sacrifice your pawn, you play b5. The idea of playing this, of playing b5, is that you want to open up a file and b file for your rooks. Also in the future the biggest weakness in white's position will be b2 pawn. For that reason also in the Benko Gambit usually you will play fianchetto. After a6 the main line, so full accepted variation, is ba6. The main move for black and classical move is taking on a6 with the bishop. But now we will analyze something different, something new, and it's a little bit unusual line for black. For that reason I recommend you to play that, and after all lines, after all continuations, you will see that black will always have very good position. So now you don't take on a6, you wait with taking, you play g6. White keeps developing knight c3, you play bishop g7, so again you don't take. e4, you play short castle. The question is, why did we play like this? So you want to develop your pieces as soon as possible, and in the future you will try to attack white's queen side, and later you will take bishop a6. But for now you will just develop your pieces, and also when white plays knight f3, still you don't take, you play queen a5, you develop also your queen. After queen a5 you wanna take on e4, so obviously you're attacking e4 pawn, and white is forced to defend that pawn, or just to avoid taking. White can avoid taking with bishop d2. White plays bishop d2, and now of course you cannot take on e4 because bishop will just attack queen, so knight takes on e4 and queen will be under attack. So after bishop d2 you take bishop a6. Now it's right time to take on a6, and this is the whole point of this line. So you play first queen a5 and then you take with the bishop, and when white takes your a6 bishop, you will take with your queen there, and you will avoid castling. So that's why we played first queen a5 and then we took bishop a6. After bishop a6 white can play few different lines, so white can play bishop e2, or white can take your bishop immediately. Let's start with bishop e2. Bishop e2 is more logical, so white just wants to develop bishop, white is preparing castling, and after this move you need to take bishop e2, white takes, and you do something unusual for Benko Gambit. So now you want to trade queens, and the question is why. So you want to trade your queens because you are developed much better, and it's very easy for you to attack white's queen side. So in case, for example, white takes, you take with your knight. When white does this, you play rook fb8, what's perfectly logical. You are developing your rook and you are attacking b2 pawn, and after this, when white defends that, you just go d6. What can we say about this position? First of all, you have your rooks on a and b files, so you are putting pressure to a2 and b2 pawns. Also you have your knight on queen side, so potentially you can play knight b4. And maybe the most important thing is that light squares in white position are very weak. You see that there are many empty light squares, and some of these squares can be good for your knights. So first idea for black can be, for example, knight b4 with knight d3, and you will attack b2 pawn. Also later maybe you will have this maneuver with the knight d7, knight b6, then knight c4. Also, if you want to support your d3 knight, you can go c4 at some moment, and then you can go knight c5, knight d3, or a6 knight to d3. So there are many good ideas, and it's very uncomfortable for white, especially because now it's very easy for black to play. So you want to remaneuver your knights. You have a lot of good squares for them, like we saw c4 and d3, and it's easy to play as black. And of course, your bishop on g7 is fantastic. So this is something normal for Benko Gambit. So one of main pieces in your position is this bishop, and like I said, at least this position is equal. That is about taking on a6 by white. Instead of taking, white can play very directly, very actively. White can play e5. After e5, you need to trade queens. When white takes, you go knight g4. So you are just moving your knight, and at the same time you are attacking the e5 pawn. White has to defend that, and white plays bishop f4. After bishop f4, you do something specific for Benko Gambit, so you are attacking the center. And you will see in next videos, in many lines, white will have very strong center. White will have pawns on d5 and d5. But very often these pawns are not strong, they are very weak. And it's very easy for you to attack them. And like you see, you have many pawn breaks. You can play f6, or in some positions e6 or d6. Concretely, at this moment you need to play f6. After f6, you're attacking e5, so white is forced to take, and you take with your rook. The point of taking with the rook is this move. You want to bring your rook on b file, you will have two open file for your rooks, and with a lot of pieces you will attack white's queen side. And again, you can see that there is one more weakness in white position, and in other videos you will see, and in other lines you will see that d5 is very often weak. And also here, this pawn can be very weak because it's isolated pawn, and it's easy for you to attack it. So you can attack it with your g4 knight, or later you can do this with this knight, or even knight a6, knight c7. So at this moment this is at least equal position for you. So white has to move bishop, and you just play rook b6. You have open lines for rooks. d5 is weak, your pieces are active, so you have full compensation for a sacrificed pawn. This was about e5 here. In the past, here we said that white can take on a6 and play bishop e2. We saw bishop e2, let's see now bishop a6. After this you just take, white plays this, you play d6. And when white takes there, you take with your knight. And again you do something very logical. Again you play just that, and you play rook fb8, developing the rook, knight bd7. Again you see that you have nice squares for your knights, and later you can go like c4 with knight c5, knight d3, or you can do it with another knight, so to go to b4 or c5 and then to d3, or you can play with d7 knight to b6 and to c4. So you have a lot of nice ideas with your knights there. This is about bishop d2. So if white does bishop d2, you need to take bishop a6. You saw that also if you trade queens, you will have very good position because you developed your pieces very quickly. And the whole point of playing queen a5 and this line is that you will develop your pieces very quickly, and you will have compensation for a sacrificed pawn. This was about bishop d2. Now we will see knight d2. This is also very logical move. So white wants just to cover the king with the knight and to defend e4. Also at some moment maybe white has knight c4 with tempo. After this you take bishop a6. Again white can take on a6 or go bishop e2. First of all, if white takes, you take with your queen, and white goes queen e2. After queen e2, you see that now this is a little bit different than main line. So we can say that the main line is bishop d2. So this position is different because now white is covering light squares with the knight. So knight is covering that, and also with the king. For that reason, at this moment, you will not play d6 and knight d7, you will play something more active. You will play e6. So you are attacking the center immediately, and we see that white is struggling with the king because king is still in the center. And in many lines you can go rook e8, and you can try to exploit the best position of the king. After e6, the most logical for white is to trade. You take, for example, white plays short side castle, you just take on d5, and you play something like b4. I can say that already black has advantage. So in case this happens, you just need to go e6. When white trades, you take, and your position is fantastic. You have knight b4 idea. White has weak pawns in the center, so e4 and d5. Also, you have open files for your rook, so you have full compensation. This is about bishop a6. Instead of bishop a6, at this moment white can also play bishop e2. After this move, you will just play d6, and you keep developing. So now you don't play e6, you play d6, and at this moment you play knight fd7. This move is one of specific moves for this opening, and generally for this pawn structure, when you have bishop on g7 with pawns like this. So you go knight f to d7 because you want to open up your bishop, and also you want to bring your knight to queen side, because now obviously you want to play on queen side, so you want to bring as many as possible pieces there. That's why you play knight fd7. Knight fd7, at some moment white has to take on a6, and let's see, for example, now white takes, you take with the knight, white goes knight c4, and then you just move your queen, so queen b4, queen e2. At this moment, very interesting is that you want to trade knights, so you don't want to keep the tension there because your bishop is extremely strong. This bishop is attacking c3 knight, b2 pawn. Later you will bring your f, rook to b8 maybe, and obviously black is completely fine here. So if white moves the knight, yes, also this is one of ideas with the knight, knight c7, knight b5, knight d4. What's perfectly logical, you just want to bring the knight to the center. And at this moment, this is very easy for black to play. This was about knight f3. So if knight f3 happens, you just play queen a5, you take on a6, and it's perfectly fine position for black. Instead of knight f3, white can play two side lines. So white can play e5 right away, that is the most active, and also white can play very interesting move a7. Let's see first e5. After e5, you just move your knight back, so you just have one square for the knight. You play knight e8. After knight e8, white can play knight f3, so to keep developing, or to start attacking, to play h4. Let's see first h4. After h4, you take on e5. You win that pawn, so with this white is sacrificing the pawn, but white can get very strong attack. And after h5, you need to remember this move, queen b6. This is very strong move, because with this move, you are tying down white's light square bishop. So now white cannot play at some moment maybe bishop h6, because you will take on b2 in that case. So that's why you play this. Also, you see that queen is very flexible. Queen controls both sides. And it's very easy for black to play after f queen b6. So you play there, let's say white takes, you take, white keeps developing, you move back bishop. And this position is completely unclear. It's a playable position. Good thing for you is that you played castle, white king is still in the center. But you need to be careful, because white also can develop very strong attack. But generally this shouldn't be problematic for black. Because, like I said, you already developed a lot of your pieces. Your king is safe. White king is still in the center, so everything is fine here. This is about h4. Let's see now if white doesn't play that aggressively, if white plays knight f3. If knight f3 happens, then you attack the center immediately. You play d6. You wanna open up your dark square bishop, and you want to create weaknesses in white's position. White takes, for example, you take with the knight, and now you just keep developing, and you play the most logical things like knight a6, knight f5. So now d5 pawn is isolated pawn. You are pawn down now, but you are much better developed, and probably in near future you will take d5 pawn, because you can attack it by your knight, your a6 knight. You can go knight b4 or knight c7. You can also play bishop b7. Also, you can block the queen by playing knight d4, and knight will be extremely strong there. So this position is fine for black. In case white doesn't take on d6, if white plays bishop f4, again you just develop. You play knight d7, you put pressure to e5, and when white takes there, you take with the knight. And then again, you take back a6 pawn. Now you see that b2 is even weaker because white already played with the bishop. So you will have like queen b6 with tempo or rook b8, and it's very easy to play as black, and like I said, you have full compensation here. This is about e5. So e5, you move back your knight. If white plays knight f3, you play d6. If h4, you take on e5. Let's see now this line, a7. This is very interesting for white. White just wants to sacrifice that pawn, because in every case white will lose that. And now in some lines, position of rook on a7 will not be so great. So that's the reason why white gives up that pawn. White plays knight f3, but the thing is that now you will not waste time for taking that pawn. So you will just attack the center immediately. So you don't need to play queen a5, so you play e6 immediately. e6, white keeps developing, so plays, for example, bishop e2, you take on d5, white takes, and you play d6. What happened now? You traded e-pawns. What's good for you, because now d5 pawn is undefended. I mean, it's defended by queen and knight, but queen and knight are tied down. So white has to stay there with these pieces to defend that pawn. For example, white plays short castle, you play knight a6. The point of knight a6 is that you want to play at some moment knight c7 or knight b4 to put pressure to this pawn. Also, you have bishop b7, and you will attack this pawn with many pieces. Now white has two different moves. So white can play bishop b5. The idea of bishop b5 is that white wants to put bishop on c6 or knight b5. Let's see first bishop b5. If this happens, you play knight c7 with tempo, and then you go bishop b7. You're trading bishops. You can play queen a8 to put pressure to a2, so white rook will be tied down, and at the same time you're putting pressure to d5. So queen is very flexible on a8. And this position is probably equal. This is about bishop b5. So if white does that, you just go knight c7 with bishop b7. If white does knight b5 instead of bishop b5, you move your rook to b7, and a lot of very strong players play rook d7 here. What's not so good. So you play rook b7. And then when white develops bishop with tempo, when white plays bishop f4, white is attacking d6, you play rook b6. And now this pawn is defended. And then after, for example, a4, you just go knight c7, you wanna trade knights, and also at the same time you're putting pressure to d5. Again, in the future you will play bishop b7, maybe also here at some moment you will play with queen to a8, and d5 is the main weakness in white position. At the same time, b2 pawn is weak, because if you open up your bishop, you will attack that pawn. So this was about the line when white plays a7 and you play e6, and when white plays bishop e2. Now we will see what will happen if white takes on h6. This is also very logical for white, so white takes, and white wants to develop pieces as soon as possible, but you just retake, white develops bishop, and you play d5. And after that, knight c6. So this is normal position. You're pawn down, but you have extremely strong center, and your pieces are very active. White is still undeveloped. In the future, you can do something concrete in the center, so you can go like d4 with e5, maybe to open up your bishop, or you will do something else. You can go maybe somewhere with your knights, like knight h5, knight f4, or you can get some tempo with knight b4, maybe bishop a6 later, or you can develop this bishop to b7, and then after d4 this bishop will be very strong. So there are many different ideas for black, and at this moment black has compensation for pawn. White is probably slightly better because white played first move, but that is not a big deal, and this position is easy to play as black. So in case white plays h7, you take with rook, and then you will play e6. You will immediately attack the center, and like we saw, you will have compensation for sacrificed pawn. So this was about lines in full accepted variation. There was just one more line. I didn't say that. So after queen a5, instead of defending the knight with bishop d2, or instead of knight d2 here, white can play also bishop d3, what is not good for white, because now you have very interesting tactic. You can take back the pawn immediately, so you play knight d5. This is very interesting move, because now when white takes, you take bishop c3. When white takes, you take. And then you play the check. If white plays bishop d2, then you take on d3. If white moves king, you take there. So for that reason, after bishop d3, you just play knight d5, and black has immediate advantage. We are done with full accepted variation, and you see that after all these lines, black has compensation for sacrificed pawn, and also if you trade queens, we saw that still black will be completely fine with very active play.